I'm Robin Zimmerman. This is the Women's Association of Hilton Head Islands author series for October. We're very excited. We've just been talking with John Cribb. He is our featured author this month. He is a very interesting gentleman. He's written mostly nonfiction and he's a very prolific writer, but he has written a novel and it's called Old Abe, a Novel. So we're very excited to talk with him. And as ladies are coming on, and we'll of course start the webinar officially at 5 o'clock, but until then, I'd like to bring in Janet Porter, my partner, my co-host, who will actually be doing the interview with John. Hey, Janet.
Hi, Robin. How are you today?
I'm doing good. You look spiffy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I worry that I have the same thing on camera every time we meet, you know?
I know. I put this blouse on. I went, I think I wore yellow that time. I don't know.
Yeah, people are like, don't you have any other clothes?
Right. Well, I'm excited for the interview. We've talked a little bit with John before we came on, and he's very fascinating, and I know you're going to do another great job. So I'm excited. Here we are in October. We have, of course, November and December, and we're planning our 2021 author series for WAHHI as well. So it's been a huge success. I mean, who would have thought, Janet?
Might start.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't expect that we'd end up with such great response and are really pleased with that. So, I'm thrilled to be here again today, and we have our first male author. So, we told John we're practicing gender equity today.
Right. So what we'd like to do is, ladies are joining our webinar that again officially begins at 5 o'clock. We like to get to know you a little bit more, ladies, get you involved, get you to participate. So we always begin with a few polling questions. And we've got some good ones, I think, planned for this afternoon. And basically, we'll launch the poll with a question, and you take your cursor and just go over it and click on your answer. And our first question, Janet, if we're ready to go, is, are you eating out at restaurants? Or have you been eating out at restaurants since COVID? So if you say yes, are you only eating outside? Yes, you've been eating inside as well, or no, or you've been doing takeout, or just no, you're not going to restaurants at all. So this is an interesting question, because it's such a, that's such a centerpiece for our social relationships and our family relationships, to go out to eat and to just, enjoy, whether it's happy hour or to go for a nice dinner or a brunch. So I'm anxious to see what our ladies are saying. So what are they saying, Janet? Again, take your cursor and just go over and select your choice.
Sure. So we have 11 people who've responded. We have 15 on so far, and we have 11 people who've responded. 64% say yes, they are going. Actually, now it's 67% because somebody else responded. 67% have said that they are eating outside only.
Okay.
8% said they've eaten inside. So only 8% say they've eaten inside restaurants, and 33% said takeout only. And my husband and I together, I have to say, are in the takeout only category. He has not been to a restaurant since March 14th.
Really?
So, yeah, I have been, but he has not. So we have a divided household on this.
Well, we've gone probably 4 or 5 times in this 7-8 month period, and we've only sat outside. I don't feel comfortable sitting inside at all yet. But the governor is allowing 100% capacity now.
Yes, I know.
So it's going to be interesting as the months get chillier, and I understand that the numbers still seem to go up. People need to be wearing their masks and continue to social distance. So it's a challenging time for all of us, for sure.
Robin, I'm a hospital administrator, and so I'm in I'm in contact with hospital administration friends around the country. And the other states, I think the latest data was something like 44% of the states are increasing. And South Carolina is one of the few where numbers haven't been increasing dramatically, and we're really lucky here as a result of that. But my hospital administration friends, people who've been in the business 30 years say this is the hardest thing they've ever gone through. You know, really just monitoring day-to-day capacity and are there enough ICUs and ventilators, and it's really tough in other parts of the country. We heard a lot about it in New York early on, but we're not really hearing how traumatic it is for caregivers and families in the other places that are experiencing surges similar to what happened in New York, where there really was, they were really over capacity.
Well, what they're saying, there's going to be this second wave, which is it's like we are so ready for it. We are so a society where something can happen and then we move on, right?
Yes,
but this
yes.
is just going on, and it's hard to move on, and we just have to cope, and we just have to, and with WAHHI, I think this is a great example of how we're continuing to connect with our membership. And I mean, it's very, very hard. I actually heard a doctor yesterday as I was driving to Buford that said we're going to be probably wearing masks for another year at least.
Yes. Well, and I really want to commend everyone who's participating today, because I think it's so important during these times to become familiar with technology, right?
Yes.
And to use it to really reach out and stay connected to people.
Yes.
We've never had a time where that was more important, and we're really concerned. In fact, I'm active with Hospice Care of the Lowcountry, and we're doing a special webinar, and I'd be glad to send this to the WAHHI membership. We're doing a special webinar for the community that's free called Grief, Keeping Your Loved Ones Present. Wow. Because we're so concerned about the suicide rate and the depression rate nationwide, and how tough the holidays are going to be for people. Yes. And so we want to give really concrete coping strategies. And I'd be glad to send that. You can find out more about that by going to hospicecareoftheLowcountry.com. And and if anybody wants me to send them the link, I'd be glad to do that. Nancy Fish will chat that in right now. We'll send that to people. But coping strategies for how to cope with the fact that you're not going to have everyone around the Thanksgiving Day table and at Christmas it's really important to think that through and to be prepared, because it's going to be tough.
And it's going to be hard. I know it is. And actually, one of the coping strategies leads us to our next question. Our next polling question is exercise. So for some, people are exercising more, others are less. So our question is, have you been exercising, getting up and moving, whether it's going to a gym with a mask, or whether it's walking or boating or whatever it might be, paddleboarding, more or less during COVID? So this is our next polling question. As far as not being sedentary and just watching too much Netflix or movies, what have you been doing? Have you been exercising more? Have you been exercising less, ladies? Or has it been about the same? So I know for me, I'm probably about the same. I actually do go to the rec center and it's empty, but I wear my mask and I do rowing and I do a little bit of treadmill and some weights. And you said, Janet, that you're a swimmer, so that's been hard because many of the pools have been closed. So let's see, what are the ladies telling us?
Sure. So we've had 21 people respond to the poll, and the answer is that 43% said they're exercising about the same, but 43% said they're exercising more.
Good.
So that is terrific. And 14% say they're exercising less. Those are probably people who went to a gym and maybe their gym is closed.
Right.
But one of the coping strategies clearly during all this is to get out, breathe fresh air. We're so lucky to live in a pretty place where you can do that, and to get moving around. And it was tough for me when the pools were closed.
Yes.
But that is a really important coping strategy, no question.
All right, so let's move on to our next question. Again, I know, ladies, you're joining us, and we'll start promptly at 5 o'clock with John Cribb and our super interviewer, Janet Porter. We'll be talking with him about his book, Old Abe, a Novel. But our third polling question, as we're waiting, is what more could WAHHI be doing during COVID? We think that we've been innovative and creative already, but there's other things that we could be doing more of, whether it's the chef series or continuing with author series as we are, or we had a great September 22nd luncheon outside. So do we want to have more webinars or virtual events? Do we want to have more in-person events? The December 8th will be in person, but it will be outside at Shelter Cove, going to different restaurants and so forth. What about more ways to connect with volunteer opportunities or other? So ladies, go ahead and click on your choice about what we, and of course Tamara Avert, our president, has done a yeoman's job leading us through this challenging time. We've really had to re-engineer, haven't we, Janet? It's just been difficult, but I want to hear what our ladies say. You know, what were they saying, Janet?
So we have 20 people who've responded to the poll, and the answer, the drum roll is 75% say they'd like WAHHI to do more webinars or virtual events.
Okay.
5% say they'd like more in-person events, and 15% say more ways to connect with volunteer opportunities. But I just want to ask people, if you're not familiar with the chat function, please go to the bottom or top of your website. You'll see a little icon to say chat. Click on that, and the chat function will come up on the right, and you just type in to everyone what you type into, and everyone, all the panelists and all the audience can see what you're thinking. And so if you have any suggestions for what you think WAHHI could do more for you during COVID, because you know, WAHHI is really fundamentally about connecting with other people. And we are really anxious to hear from members as to how we can meet that need to keep people connected.
And Janet, you know, we've got a great president, we've got a great board, we've got great leadership, but really we want those ideas, those suggestions to come from our members.
We do.
So we don't want to be up here saying, this is what we're going to do, da, da, da. We want you all to give us, kind of guide us. As you know, Betty Hamilton will be our president next year. So she's in the throes of planning for 2021. So this is a very important question.
Yes.
And so yes, use that chat function. And I think we have maybe just a couple minutes left also with that chat function, which is either at the bottom of your screen or at the top, depending if you have a laptop or an iPad. You can recommend an author or a book, your favorite book you've read during COVID. Just go ahead and put it, just type it into that little chat, and all of our ladies can see that. So if you've read a great book this summer that you want to share with us, just let us know.
Yeah, while we're waiting for people to do that, I thought I'd tell you that somebody chatted in that their exercise has been going back and forth to the fridge.
Oh my God.
We want to bring you from WAHHI not only connections but humor.
Right.
So I thought that was great.
Well, you know, I retired, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago from working full time, for 40 years or whatever. I'm not used to being around the house in the refrigerator and snacking, and you know, I'm eating more lunch than I used to, and that's why I've got to exercise.
You know, I think the saying's always been the freshman 20, which is that you gain 20 pounds. Now they say COVID-19 is for the 19 pounds everybody's gained during.
But some others have. I've got a neighbor who has used this opportunity to lose weight, where she knows that she can't do a whole lot, so she's been walking and doing water aerobics and all kinds of, and she's lost, I think, 30 pounds.
Yeah, there's many ideas, but I do want to comment on one one person wrote in and said that what they'd like to do is for us to have a webinar on Zoom etiquette and best efforts for looking good on Zoom. And totally coincidentally, Robin, I think you know I'm a faculty member, and I've been doing webinars on how to have an awesome Zoom interview for graduating students.
Oh, okay.
I've done them at UNC, Ohio State, and I'm scheduled to do them at Medical University of Virginia. And so I had to read up on everything about how to look good on Zoom and, you know, lighting and all that stuff. So I'd be glad to do a webinar like that with people if that would be of interest. That's everything from how to just basically use it and set it up to how to look good and how to organize, and just, you know, you could do that in 30 minutes, and it's great tips. You know, what I've learned from that is that lighting is everything.
Yeah.
And you really want to have lighting from above and in front of you, not behind you. Yeah.
So I've got lighting above. That's why I brought my lamp.
And in front, exactly.
So I think that would be great, Janet. So let's look at planning that.
Yeah, I would be glad to do that for people. And it's, you know, some of that information is just on it if you go to YouTube or something like that. But anyway, Robin, it's been great chatting with you. I'll see you in a few minutes.
See you in a few minutes. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 2020 Author Series presented by the Women's Association of Hilton Head Island. My name is Robin Zimmerman, and I have been honored to serve as moderator during this series. I think this is our fourth or fifth author that we've interviewed. It's been so exciting for all of us to get to know these authors from all over the country and learn about their books and learn about their style and how they develop characters. Actually, we asked for your feedback after each webinar, and one of our ladies said, attending these webinars broadens me beyond my usual reading. I appreciate that WAHHI is providing these opportunities to meet different authors. And this author, John Cribb, is very different. First of all, he's our first man. And he's basically a nonfiction writer, but he's written his first novel called Old Abe, a novel. So Janet will be interviewing him in just a moment, but a few just housekeeping items. This, of course, is a Zoom webinar. It is not a Zoom meeting. Some of you think, I wish we could see everyone, but we've had up to 100 ladies actually be part of our author series. So it works out better for you to see us, but us not to see all of you for this particular format. Also wanted to remind you that we do have that chat section or icon, which is at the bottom of your screen or at the top, where if you have an iPad or a laptop. We have Kathy Reynolds is kind of still with us a little bit behind the scenes. And we also have Nancy Fish, who has joined us as our new technical director because Kathy has moved. And of course we miss her, but she's still a little bit involved. So thank you so much, Nancy. So if you have questions, comments, please just go to the chat section, write those down. If you're having technical difficulties, then let us know that as well. That is your opportunity to stay connected with us, to keep us on track, and to be directly involved, even though we're not together in person. So with that, I would like to bring in Janet Porter, who is our interviewer extraordinaire. She has done such an outstanding job, and we've had great feedback from our authors saying that Janet always does her homework. She always has read the book. She's always read other books by the authors and really brings out the best in that particular author. So Janet, I'm going to turn it over to you now for you to do your best work. Thanks, Janet.
Thank you so much, Robin. Well, this is a dream volunteer opportunity if you love to read, because I have felt compelled to not only read the book that we're talking about to all the WAHHI members, but a lot of the author's previous books. So it's kept me very busy during COVID, and I'm actually grateful for WAHHI to give me this chance to get immersed in reading during this time. So I am so looking forward to introducing you to John Cribb, and it's not just because he's our first male author. It is because I have some real thoughts about the book, Old Abe, and I think you will too if you read it. So let me just tell you a little bit about John before he comes on. He's a New York Times best-selling author, really in nonfiction. He's written a variety of subjects from education to history. His previous books include co-authoring The American's Patriot with Bill Bennett. Some of you will remember that name. Bill Bennett was the Secretary of Education for the United States. He also wrote with Bill Bennett and Chesterfield, The Educated Child. He's co-edited a 3-volume world history text called The Human Odyssey, and he's developed online history courses. So he's truly a historian. He worked as Bill Bennett's collaborator on the New York Times #1 best-selling book called The Book of Virtues. And his writing has been published in everything from the Wall Street Journal to the USA Today, etc. During the Reagan administration, John served in the Department of Justice, the Department of Education, and the National Endowment for the Humanities. He's a native of Spartanburg, and he and Robin, if you were listening in earlier, were chatting in about Spartanburg, and he studied literature at Vanderbilt University. So he's one of those people who actually, is using his undergraduate degree later on. John lives in Spartanburg with his wife, Kirsten, and their daughters, Molly and Sarah. So John, please join me.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Great, thanks for having me.
I am so excited to talk to you. The other authors I've had, I've been, kind of interested in getting to meet them, but I'm interested to talk to you. And that's because I have real questions about how you decided what to write and how to write it. So let's just start with the fact that you have been a prolific writer throughout your career, but this is your first novel.
Yeah.
So talk about what inspired you to finally tackle a novel after all these years of being grounded in nonfiction and facts.
Well, I got the idea for this novel in 2006, believe it or not. And I've been a Lincoln fan for a long time, but I checked out of our local public library, the Spartanburg County Library System, which is a fantastic library system, Carl Sandburg's landmark biography of Abraham Lincoln. It's 6 volumes long. It may be the most beautifully written of all the nonfiction Lincoln biographies, especially the first 2 volumes, which are called The Prairie Years, which is about his life before the White House. But anyway, I was plowing my way through that. And at the same time, I reread Irving Stone's wonderful novel about Michelangelo, which is The Agony and the Ecstasy.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
some
yeah,
of y'all
yeah.
probably read it. It's just a wonderful historical novel about the life of, fictionalized novel or account of the life of Michelangelo. And it just set me to thinking, I wonder if I could do the same kind of thing for Abraham Lincoln. So that was kind of the impetus of the idea. Now that was way back in 2006. I wasn't sure I could do it because I'd never written a novel before, but I always wanted to. And so, I wrote a little bit started the research and wrote a little bit just to see how if I could even do it, and wrote a little bit more. And then I just kind of got sucked into it. My wife kids me because, I started this thing in 2006 and it's finally been published. And she says, look, it only took 4 years to fight the Civil War. This is more than 3 times. It took you more than 3 times the length of the Civil War to write this darn thing. But in my defense, it was a very on and off again project. Sometimes the manuscript would sit in a drawer for months or even a year without my looking for it, and then I'd pick it up again. So those of you who've written books know that it is often a very part-time labor of love. And so that's the way this book was.
So John, I think the audience can tell from your accent that you're a Southerner.
Yeah.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up here in Spartanburg.
Oh, did you?
And then I went away to college in Nashville at Vanderbilt, and then from Vanderbilt went up to Washington, worked for the Reagan administration for about 4 years, and then did a bunch of other things in Washington. We moved back to Spartanburg in 2001, right after 9/11, and I've been here. We raised our family here in Spartanburg.
So as a Southerner, to be really an aficionado of Lincoln is a little bit of an oxymoron, isn't it?
Yeah, some people comment on that. A guy from the South Carolina, the cradle of secession, loves Lincoln so much. But I've been a Lincoln fan a long time. Some of my earliest memories are of sitting on our living room couch in Spartanburg with my mom and my sister and my brother. And my mom, like, good parents, she read aloud a lot to us when we were young. The old, the Bobbsey twins and the old Childcraft series. Some of y'all might remember that, a collection of stories of poems. And there's a great series called the Childhood of Famous Americans biographies that she read, including one called Abe Lincoln, Frontier Boy. And, those stories of Lincoln, walking miles through the woods to borrow books and studying by firelight. And I remember in that book, that there's a great story, which is true story, that when he was living in Southern Indiana and he wanted to play a trick on his stepmother, Sally Lincoln, she had just finished whitewashing the ceiling of her cabin. She was very proud of it, their log cabin. And so while she had her back turned, he was a tall kid. He picked up one of his cousins and dipped his feet in mud and flipped him upside down and had him walk across the ceiling, leave those muddy footprints on the ceiling.
Yeah.
Fortunately for Lincoln, for Abe, his stepmother, Sally Lincoln, had a very good sense of humor. So I think she laughed it off. I'm sure she made him clean it up too. But anyway, those old stories really sunk in with me. Oh, and I should say one more. When I was in the 4th grade, I went to did part of my schooling at Spartanburg Day School and then part at Spartanburg High School. But the 4th grade, our English teacher, Mrs. Cheney, had everybody in the class. We had to memorize the Gettysburg Address, much to our chagrin, I'm sure. We each had to stand up at the front of a class, and we each took a day and we had to recite it. And those words and sentiments, I think I didn't know it at the time, but they sunk in deep with me, which just goes to show every once in a while it's probably worth memorizing something in school, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a long way of saying that this, guy from South Carolina has been a Lincoln fan for a long time.
And you've been quoted as saying, John, that you love Abraham Lincoln, and part of your motivation was to inspire others to love and admire him as much as you do.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. I do love him. And so that's one big reason I wrote this book, was because I want others to love him, and hopefully I want others to know him at least, and hopefully love him as much as I do. I think that you understand the American story better if you understand Lincoln's story, because in a lot of ways he stands center stage in that great American story. I think in a lot of ways he embodies the best of America and American ideals. So I think it's important that people know him.
I have so many things I want to say. The first thing I want to say is that John, I don't know if I've told you that we've polled and asked the people who are watching what they most prefer to read: science fiction, nonfiction, biographies, etc. And historical fiction comes up as the #1 choice.
Great.
So we were,
Yeah.
this is right up the alley of our audience members. The second thing I want to say is that having read the book, is people might think, oh, I can't read about the Civil War right now, in the midst of COVID, it's too depressing. I didn't find it to be depressing at all. I found it very inspirational, because I kind of, it makes you think, if we can get through the Civil War and the tragedy of having the president who kept us together assassinated,
Mm-hmm.
it makes you appreciate the resiliency of our country and how much we can get through COVID. I mean, it makes COVID pale in comparison, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't find it depressing at all. I found it very inspirational. And so people who might be thinking, ooh, I don't really want to read about something that's going to be depressing, I didn't find it that way at all.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you saying that, because I hope it is inspirational. I think in the end, it is a story of hope for this country. I really do, because something good was preserved, was held together, largely because of Lincoln, and improved, made better, a new birth of freedom, as Lincoln put it. But it is true that it was a long, tough, hard 4 years for both Abraham and Mary Lincoln. They were they just stepped into a bad situation. The country had already fallen apart before he even got to Washington. And I think you said it, but just so your viewers understand, this book starts with, it is the story of the last 5 years of his life. So it starts with his inauguration in the spring of 1860, and you're just at his side. You're at his elbow every chapter, every scene, as he goes through his presidency in the Civil War. And of course, I tried to, there's Lincoln had two sides of him. There was that famous melancholy side, but there's also that humorous side, and I tried to, bring that in to some degree. So I think there's a touch of humor in the book. But it was a very tough 4 years for both Abraham and Mary Lincoln. It took a lot of perseverance. Lincoln, he used to say that he was like a man trying to keep a tent up in a storm during those 4 years. And he said he got the tent staked down to the ground, and the wind would blow out one of the tent stakes. So he'd grab a hammer and peg it back down to the ground. And then as soon as he got in the ground, it would blow out another tent stake. So he'd run around the other side of the tent and peg it back down. And then as soon as he got it in, it would blow that out. So he'd go around and peg the other one back down. And he told people, that's all I do all day long, because I keep pegging away. And that's what I mean to keep doing, pegging away. So he is a model of perseverance. And I think that's really inspirational. He's a model of a lot of things. There are a lot of virtues embodied in Lincoln's life that I think we can take inspiration from, like his perseverance and his integrity, and his compassion and his faith. So I hope some of that comes through in the book too, and people can take.
Oh, I think it does. I think it also makes you appreciate, and everyone studied the Civil War, but it makes you appreciate, had things not gone the direction we went in, which is to preserve the Union, that this land mass, which is what really the United States is a big land mass, could look like Europe.
Right.
And could be 17 different countries or 5 different countries, and how what the destiny was. You told a great story. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about, you told a great story kind of right before we got on about speaking in Charleston, and the question of, what's it like as a Southerner to have Abraham Lincoln as your hero. And would you talk about what happened when you spoke in Charleston?
Yeah, I talk at I think it's the Widows and Orphans Home. I think the Confederate Widows Home, I think it's called. Um, and I talked to them. I gave them a talk and talked to them about the second inaugural address and how that's the speech where that came at the very towards the end of the war, and Lincoln, by then was given in March of 1865, and right, I mean, just a few weeks before he was assassinated, beginning his second term. And he, in that, by the time he gave that address, the war wasn't quite over. People knew it was going to end, and they knew the North was going to win. And Lincoln gives that great address, and there were a lot of people in the North who were very angry with the South by then, as you can imagine. They were really mad, and there were people in the North who wanted revenge. They wanted to see the South on its knees, and Lincoln said no. He says he doesn't think that's the right thing to do, and he talks about treating our fellow Americans with malice toward none, with charity for all, that famous Lincoln line. And by charity, he means Christian love, not philanthropy. Anyway, I talked to him about them, and they liked the talk a lot. And after it was over, a couple of them came up to me and they said, you're the first person we've ever had come talk about Lincoln at the Confederate. And she said, a couple of our members refused to come. I said, oh. But anyway, they were very, very gracious and like me. But it just goes to show some hard feelings take a long time to die out.
Yeah, 150 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go back to something else you said earlier. You mentioned Lincoln's virtues, and talk a little bit about what you found about his virtues that you wanted to be thematic in the book.
Yeah, well, he really was a man of really great character, and I tell people, I think Lincoln's been a hero from history for me, as I say, for a long time. And I tell people, I think everybody ought to have a hero from history. Somebody you pick out from the past, whose deeds and whose words and whose character and whose virtues you can hold up as a model for yourself and kind of aspire to. And if you're looking for a hero from history, you really cannot do any better than Lincoln. He really lived a great life. He really did. As I say, he was, as I say, as a man of great compassion. I don't think it's a coincidence that the president who wrote and signed the Emancipation Proclamation, because he spent a long time writing it, was a man of great compassion. Slavery offended Lincoln's sense of justice. He said, slavery's not wrong, then nothing is wrong. But it also offends his sense of compassion. He's a hero of intellectual virtues, like an eagerness to learn. Lincoln used to say that his father, Tom Lincoln, sent him to school by littles, a little here and a little there out on the frontier in between plantings and plowings. Those littles added up to less than 1 year of formal education his entire life. And that took place in little log cabin schoolhouses on the Kentucky and Indiana frontiers. But he loved to read. He loved to learn. He would walk miles through the Indiana woods to lay his hands on a book. He used to say, my best friend is a man who can get me a book, when he was younger. And he takes that eagerness to learn into the White House with him. And that's one reason he is one of our greatest presidents and greatest leaders, is because of that willingness and that eagerness to learn. And he was brilliant at learning on the job. You could make the case he was the least prepared of just about any of the presidents coming into office, but he was brilliant at learning on the job. So there are a host of virtues like that you can learn from Lincoln. And as I say, I hope some of them come out in this book, because I really wanted to try to make him a walking, talking, breathing fellow in this book. And that was the point, of course, of tackling it as a fictional project, because fiction can bring characters alive in ways that nonfiction can't.
I was very lucky. I had a chance a couple years ago to have a dinner at Williamsburg with David McCullough, who, of course, has studied, our presidents, and he talked about what were the common characteristics of the presidents, although people see them as very different. They see Reagan very different than Carter, very different than Johnson. And he talked about that one of the things that distinguishes most of the presidents is that they had that curiosity and love for learning, and that regardless of what their formal education was, and we know, for example, that Harry Truman came into the White House with no more than a high school degree, that regardless of what kind of, and of course Lincoln now with 1 year of formal college education, that regardless of the years of education, how much all of them shared that love for reading and were passionate about it, and were also, because of that love for reading, had read a lot of history.
Yeah.
And really appreciated history, which is clearly the case here. So I wanted to comment on your thing about, no, you couldn't have any hero greater than Abraham Lincoln. As you know, for children, it's really important for them to identify with their heroes. So my hero was a woman, and it was Clara Barton.
Yeah.
And I read Clara Barton's biography about the same time you were talking that you read Lincoln's. And of course, she's the founder of the U.S. Red Cross. The Red Cross had actually been started in Europe. And she was my hero. She was my hero. And I became a hospital administrator. And I think
because of Clara Barton.
I think she was a big part of that. I think this desire to provide care and charitable care to everyone was sparked at an early age. So particularly for everybody who's thinking about what they should get their grandchildren for Christmas, that, you give them a book about astronauts, they're going to want to be an aeronautical engineer or an astronaut. I mean, think about how much you can shape your because I have great nieces and nephews and grandchildren, and I'm thinking about what I can give them at that age of 7, 8, 9, 10, 5. I've got a 5-year-old, and certainly children's books that are biographies of heroes. We need heroes,
Yes.
So that's terrific. So I'm the reason I said I really wanted to talk to you is because I'm fascinated by how you, as a historian who's been based on facts, have how you then switch to nonfiction, and what that must have been a struggle for you, because you knew, first of all, you knew so much from reading Carl Sandburg's biographies of Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
And your book is in comparison, of course, it's just shorter and readable, right? Your book's very approachable and easy to read. And so how could you tell us about that process of you taking all that wealth of knowledge you had and figuring out what to condense into a readable book, and also to not be so wedded to facts that you don't tell a good story, because you've told a good story.
Well, thank you. Yeah, of course the story was there. I can't take any credit for the story. My job was to, take that story and retell it in a new way. Well, as far as the question about writing fiction when I've done so much nonfiction, it was both a help and a hindrance. It was a help in that my research skills, I think, were well honed, and my appreciation for getting things right. And I've always felt that writing about history is hard, because it's hard to get it right. It really is. It's harder than people realize if you haven't done it before. I always try to have 3 good authoritative sources to back up any fact that that I want to assert when in writing about history, and a lot of times the sources are at odds with each other. But so that was helpful. And as far as turning it into fiction goes, like I say, I did major in English at Vanderbilt. I was an English major, so I'm a literature guy at heart. And I'm one of these people that have a bunch of unpublished short stories stuffed in the drawer that I've written over the years. And so there was a real passion for approaching this. It was a long road, because they always say that people they write a novel, and the first novel is terrible, and maybe the second one's a little less worse, and the third one maybe they'll get it right. Well, I kind of did it all at once, in that my original idea of this book, as I said, was kind of the Agony and the Ecstasy approach of Irving Stone. That starts with Michelangelo as a young person, as a boy, takes him through the end. That's what I tried, and it was too unwieldy for me, especially as a first time.
Agony and Ecstasy is a tome for those who haven't read it. It's a big, what is it, 900 pages or something?
Exactly.
I mean, it's a big book.
And guess what? No publisher wants to really look at a 1,000-page book by a first-time novelist.
Right.
And to be honest, as I remember when I said sometimes the manuscript sat in the drawer for a year without my looking for it. Well, the advantage was that is I could come back with fresh eyes and read it. And even me, who loves Lincoln so much, even I looked at some of it and said, this is boring. So I was forced to, over time, cut it down, and ended up with this book. but the 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 writing fiction part, I think when I started, it was very tough and hard. Well, actually, it was hard all the way through. I mean, just writing in general for me doesn't come easily. I really work at it, but writing that 1,000-page tome gave me the chance to practice writing fiction. And writing is like anything else; it takes practice. It's like learning to play the piano, or anything else. So this book is the product of a lot of writing that produced, this much stuff. And over the years, it became, this much stuff. So I practiced the craft of writing fiction as I wrote this book. Now I loved the writing fiction part of it. I really did. I adored it. This was the most fun of any writing project I've ever done in my life, and that's because because of the creativity involved. Nonfiction is harder in the sense that there's more, you have to get it right. There's more research involved. You have to very carefully structure your arguments, and as you write. Fiction is more challenging from the creative side of it, because even though everything in this book in Old Abe happened, and I really drew on primary, I've got 250 books about Lincoln on my office bookshelf just at home. And I drew on a lot of primary source documents, like the dialogue in the book. I really tried to use words written and spoken by the characters. Almost all the characters are real people walking on and off the pages. And I wanted to make it an accurate trail of those 5 years. But of course, I fill in a lot of the gaps and a lot of details with my imagination. And that's what makes it fiction. And that was a lot of fun. I really, really loved doing that.
So tell us about, I'm in awe that you have 250 books on Lincoln. I mean, you've read 250 books on Lincoln?
Well, it's actually more than that. Last time I counted, it's probably been 2 or 3 years since I counted. I've gotten more since then. Yeah, I've actually have pretty much read all those books. Some of them I've read in the main, but those are the books I drew on as sources for Old Abe. They're all marked up. They've all got, they're all underlining and notes in the margins and that kind of
Post-it notes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what surprise, is there anything, having read 250 books, that surprised you as you went back to write your novel, that surprised you that you learned about Lincoln, that gave you a different twist on his personality or his motivations? I always think when you do a biography, what's interesting is what surprises you that you find out about the person.
Yeah. I tell you what surprised me that I didn't know about Lincoln kind of going into the project, but as I worked on it, I figured out. Well, I mean, a lot of things, I learned a lot during the course of the book, and a lot of things I get surprised. But one thing that really surprised me that I didn't know was, I think, that his faith. And I think it's a subtle thing, I think, in Old Abe. I hope it's subtle. But I actually did a word search once, and I was surprised at how many times the word God appears, and prayer and words like that. He really, as the war went on and got more and more awful, and the death and destruction just piled up around him, he becomes a man of deeper faith. There's no doubt about it. He spent a lot of time with the Bible. He told his friend Noah Brooks, he said, "I've been driven many times upon my knees because out of the conviction I had nowhere else to go." He was private about his faith, very private about it, but was clearly a man of deep faith. He came to view himself, as he put it, as a humble instrument in the hands of God. And if you read, again, the second inaugural address and some of his other writings, he actually comes to the view that God takes a very active hand in the affairs of men, and that the Civil War was God's way of judging and punishing both North and South for the sin of slavery, because Lincoln thought that both sections of the country were responsible for it, and in effect that all this bloodshed was God's way of cleansing the land of that sin. I think Lincoln's faith gave him not only the strength to make it through the war, but a lot of wisdom to be able to be the great leader that he was. So I didn't really realize that going into it. And as I say, I think it's a subtle in Old Abe, but it's there.
So John, perfect for this. Diane, I want to remind people you can chat in comments. Go to the top or bottom of your Zoom page with your cursor. You'll see a toolbar, and in that toolbar is chat, and you can write in questions. And I want to comment on one that Linda wrote. That Diane Horowitz wrote. I look forward to reading your book on Abraham Lincoln. He did seem like an incredible man with integrity and wisdom. Although he fought the South and for the abolition of slavery, didn't he at one time himself own slaves?
No, Lincoln never owned slaves. Now his Mary Todd Lincoln, his wife, her family that she came from in Lexington, Kentucky, was a slaveholding family. Of course, her brothers fought for the Confederacy, some of them. Two of her brothers were killed in the fighting. It was a torn family, just like so many American families were. Lincoln's best friend, probably his best friend his whole life, Josh Speed, was a Kentuckian. He was a slave owner. He had a plantation in Kentucky. Josh Speed's brother was Lincoln's attorney general in the last part of the war. So it was a very complicated time, as it is today. It always is a complicated time, right? Families were torn apart, so that I think you see some of that in this book. I think you certainly see the effects on Mary Todd Lincoln in this book, because the war devastated her in a way that was just tragic, I think. But yeah, no, Lincoln never owned slaves. He from early on really hated slavery. He wasn't an abolitionist until he signed the Emancipation Proclamation and abolished slavery. I guess then he was, but he wasn't what was known as an anti-slave man. Going into the war, he took the view that rather than try to abolish slavery all at once, if you could restrict it to the southern states, it would die out. And that actually was the rub that caused the war, was Lincoln insisting that he would not let slavery spread out of the South into the Western territories.
Right. So as you went from here to here, I would say you focused on three things. Number one, you focused on the last 5 years of his life. And then thematically, it seemed to me that you focused on the Civil War and his relationship with Mary Todd Lincoln. Am I right in the fact that that's what you decided to really focus on with all the other wealth of information you had?
You're exactly, you're the first one that of all the interviews I've done that's actually brought up this point. And there really are three main characters in this book. One, of course, is Lincoln, because you were at his side. It's not told in the first person, but it's told pretty much from his point of view. You're ducking in and out of his head a little bit, and then there's Mary Todd Lincoln, his wife, and the third character is really the war. There's no villain in this book like a Wicked Witch of the West or something like that. There's no one person. But there's this force that he's up against. Just as soon as he was elected to that job, all of a sudden there's this force coming at him, and it's this awful war that's erupted around him. That he often just feels like events are completely out of his control. As a matter of fact, he more than once says, I'm not in control of events, but events are in control of me, is the way he feels. And that really is the third character in the book is the war and the tragedy of what's unfolding around them.
So Alice has a great question, John, that I want to mention. She says, I'm doing regular Zoom storytelling times for my 5-year-old granddaughter, and Abraham Lincoln is her favorite president. So what children's book about Lincoln do you recommend?
Well, there are a lot of them out there, a lot of good ones. There's one, if you want a couple of oldies, the old world one that I remember Mom reading to me, I'm sure you can still find it, is Abe Lincoln Frontier Boy. And then there's another one, a famous one called Abe Lincoln Gets His Chance, that a good friend of mine in Spartanburg, we have a house up at Lake Summit in North Carolina, near Flat Rock, and they have a house near us. And she was telling me the other day that that's what made her fall in love with Lincoln when she was a kid. It was a different children's book, Abe Lincoln Gets His Chance. That was a Newbery Medal winner, I think. And you can, you can still get that. You can find that. Um, so, but there are a lot of good ones out there that I mean there are more books, they say, written about Lincoln than anybody in history except for Jesus Christ. And about 10 years ago, somebody started counting all of Lincoln's books, and he got up to about 15,000, and he stopped. And I think, because I think there are more than that, more since then, obviously. But there are a lot of really fine Lincoln books. So I would head down to your library and talk to the children's librarian and see what they recommend for you. Yeah.
So John, don't talk to anyone British, because the British believe the person with the most biographies in history is Winston Churchill.
Well, maybe, and Napoleon is another one they say is up there too. But Churchill probably gives Lincoln a run for his money. Yeah. And if you want to read a book about both of them, there's a guy named a really good Lincoln scholar named Louis Lehrman, who has written a book called Lincoln and Churchill.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a great comparison.
Yeah.
So, so many of us have heard, and I don't want to be too political here, but so many people are saying on TV that the most important U.S. election ever is the one we're in the middle of. And I stood in line yesterday and voted, so I encourage everybody to vote. But reading old Abe and reading other books like Dewey Defeats Truman, which is about the 1948 election. And so there's a lot of books out there that make you appreciate how important other elections were. This makes you appreciate how important the 1860 and the 1864 elections were in terms of ending the Civil War and establishing principles about how to treat the South. And I think that is one of the things I got out of the book, is the appreciation of how much Lincoln set the gold standard as to how the South should be treated before he was assassinated so tragically, and how important that was. But, was it your intention in this, publishing it right before the 2020 election, to put in perspective this election, and not to diminish its importance, but to say we've had other important elections and we've survived as a country?
Well, it wasn't my intention at all, because it was written and drafted long before this election came along. So it wasn't my intention. But I've had a lot of people say that have read the book say exactly what you're saying, that it really kind of helped put things today in perspective and give them things to think about, which is what history is important for, is to give us yardsticks and to remind us what came before and what people did wrong and what they did right. And things like what leadership looks like. These are the lessons we learn from history, and I think there are lessons to be learned, certainly from Lincoln, and hopefully some of them come through in old Abe. One of those lessons that I think is worth thinking about it today is just, Lincoln was the great unifier. He was all about saving the Union. He was about, he said, we are all in this together. We are all Americans. Even when the South seceded, he refused to recognize that they were out of the country. He used to say, instead of saying they were seceded, he said they are out of their proper practical relationship with the Union. Just twisting words as much as you can twist them, I guess. And he called the Southerners, he said, my dissatisfied fellow countrymen. There's an understatement if you ever heard one. But he to the end, was preaching unity, that we're all in this together. We're all Americans. And just real quickly, I know we're probably reaching the end of our time, but the other lesson I think to draw from Lincoln is that he really was fiercely devoted to our founding principles, especially the ones in the Declaration of Independence. That was his favorite founding document, that we're all created equal and we all have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He fought for those principles to his last breath. And he knew that this always has the chance to be a great country as long as we're dedicated to those principles. And that's what he talked about in the Gettysburg Address. And I think that's an important lesson for us to remember.
John, I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening, and also for giving us such a incredibly inspirational read during this time, which is so tough for everyone. You know, anyone reading your novel is left appreciating this fragility of the survival of the United States as we know it, and potentially appreciating that fragility more than they ever have from studying the Civil War. And I think it also inspires everyone by the nation's national resilience, which is such a much needed sentiment at this time as we think about the civil unrest, and we think about COVID, and we think about the forest fires. I think books like this that give us a sense of the resilience we've had of a country are really much needed books we need to be reading right now. So thank you so much. And Robin, it's back to you.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you all.
Oh my gosh. I have to say, of all the authors that we have had, Janet, I know you've clicked off. I have not read this book, John, but I am so moved by this interview. I am definitely going to go tomorrow and get this book. And I think, Janet, you summed it up beautifully by saying it's about hope, and it's about resiliency, and it's about the curiosity that all presidents have, and the love for learning, and that Abraham Lincoln was such a unifier. It was just, John, it was so nice to meet you, and what a great interview. Janet, thank you so much for your work. Powerful, just powerful. Gives us hope during this tough time. So to switch gears for a moment, I believe that, okay, it's Tamara Averett, of course, is our president. She usually comes on and talks a little bit about upcoming events for WAHHI, but she has family in town and company. So I hope that Betty is with us, Betty Hamilton, who is our president-elect for WAHHI. If Betty is with us, then I'm gonna turn it over to her to give us some upcoming news for WAHHI. So Betty, are you with us? There she is.
I'm here.
Well, it's
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Robin. We certainly are fortunate and enjoyed having John with us today. I had started reading the book, and I'm going to get right back to it. It will serve us all well to take a look at that right now. It was our hope, by providing an author series, that we could connect WAHHI avid readers with our guests who have similar interests beyond the book groups that many of us belong to. And this is a new and a different way to discuss, to learn about new authors. It's a wonderful opportunity that WAHHI is bringing to our members. We've been getting very valuable feedback from you, so please complete the survey, and by all means send us suggestions for authors. We've scheduled best-selling authors for you for every month through the rest of this year. Our upcoming authors in November, you will be seeing Susan Meisner, author of The Last Year of the War. And then in December, Susan Zarenda will discuss Bells for Eli. Linda Kennan, who is the co-chair of this series, has been very busy booking all of our authors and is hard at work at booking the author series for the first 6 months of 2021. So we hope to have an exciting lineup for 2021 to announce to you very shortly. We hope you will get a chance to read some of these books in advance of our webinars, as it is really interesting to read a book and then get to hear from the author's perspective of how it all came together for them. And switching another gear here, as we move into the fall and the holiday season, you will want to stay tuned in to the many upcoming activities as they are announced in the pink paper and on the website. In fact, there's so much news to share that you are getting your pink paper this month in 2 editions. One of them you should have received yesterday, and then the second will come next Wednesday. One event I really want to highlight is our December luncheon. It will be held on December 8th at the Shelter Cove Town Center. And it's a unique shop and dine around format with music, pop-up shops. 5 restaurants are participating with different menu options to select from for your lunch. Sign up early as there is limited dining seating available. There will be a takeout option available also. The details are in your pink paper that you received yesterday and also on the website. So we hope to see you soon around town or in the Zoom neighborhood. Back to you, Robin.
Thank you, Betty. I'm looking forward to you being our president next year. Thanks for that update. And again, the book that we are talking about today is Old Abe, a novel by John Cribb. And it is available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon and other boutique or independent bookstores. But again, the takeaway from John, he said, writing takes practice. And he also said that Abraham Lincoln, there's 15,000 books written about Abraham Lincoln, and he's read well over, I don't know, 250, many hundreds of books by Abe Lincoln. And he said that Abraham Lincoln said, the best man is the man who can get me a book. And you know what? He would walk miles to get a book. So with that, we want your feedback on this webinar series. Thank you again so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again in November. And thank you, ladies. We love WAHHI, and we appreciate your time with us for this 2020 author series. We'll see you in November. Bye, everyone.